Good day, everybody, and my name is Alan Christian V. Sabar, and here is our presentation about Norman Geisler's view on abortion and our view also. It's about this Christian ethics perspective. So, this presentation offers a scholarly and balanced overview of the ethical and theological arguments surrounding abortion, primarily through the lens of this philosopher and theologian Norman Geisler, which is the conservative Christian ethics author. Now, let us start with defining what is abortion.
What is abortion? For this slide, we are defining what abortion means from a medical perspective. Abortion is described as the termination of a pregnancy before the fetus is capable of surviving outside the womb. This means that the pregnancy ends before the baby can live independently. From a biological and medical standpoint, abortion refers to the process that removes or expels an embryo or fetus from the uterus, resulting in the end of pregnancy.
This can happen in two main ways, naturally or intentionally. A natural abortion is what we commonly know as a miscarriage. This occurs when a pregnancy ends on its own, usually due to complications such as genetic abnormalities, health problems in the mother, or other factors that prevent the pregnancy from continuing. Miscarriages are actually more common than many people realize. They can happen very early in pregnancy, sometimes even before the woman knows she's pregnant, and often occur because the fetus is not developing properly. For many women and families, experiencing a miscarriage can be emotionally painful and challenging because it's usually unexpected and out of their control. On the other hand, abortion can also be induced, meaning it is done intentionally. This is typically performed through medical procedures or medications to end a pregnancy. People may choose an induced abortion for various reasons. Sometimes it's because of serious health risks to the mother, such as complications that make continuing the pregnancy dangerous. Other times, it may be because of fetal abnormalities that are incompatible with life, or personal reasons such as financial struggles, lack of support, or not feeling ready to raise a child. There are also different ways induced abortions can be done depending on how far along the pregnancy is. For very early pregnancies, medication can be used to cause the uterus to expel the pregnancy. For later pregnancies, minor surgical procedures may be done under the care of healthcare professionals. These procedures are usually safe when done in a medical setting by trained doctors. It's important to understand that abortion is not just a medical issue, but also a deeply personal and sometimes controversial one. Around the world, people have different beliefs, laws, and cultural attitudes about abortion. Some countries allow it freely, while others restrict it except for life-threatening circumstances. Even within communities, individuals can have very different perspectives based on their values, religious beliefs, and personal experiences. Regardless of where someone stands on the issue, it's vital to approach the topic with sensitivity and empathy. Every pregnancy situation is unique, and the decisions surrounding abortion are often very difficult. For some women, it's a heartbreaking but necessarily choice to protect their health. For others, it's a decision made because of social or economic pressures. Understanding these realities helps us discuss abortion respectfully and compassionately rather than with judgment. In summary, abortion is the ending of a pregnancy, either naturally, called a miscarriage, or intentionally through medical procedures. It can happen for health, personal, or financial reasons and often carries emotional and moral challenges. Some people view abortion as wrong because they believe life begins at conception, while others see it as a woman's right to choose what happens to her body. In my opinion, abortion is a sensitive issue that should be met with empathy and understanding. While I value life, I also respect that every woman's situation is different. Instead of judging, society should focus on education, healthcare, and support to help women make informed and responsible decisions. Abortion is not something people take lightly. That's why creating a safe and understanding environment is important. By promoting awareness and open discussion, we can reduce unsafe abortions and encourage more responsible decisions. Lack of education and limited access to healthcare are major causes of unsafe abortions. Many women, especially in poor areas, lack proper knowledge and medical help, making them vulnerable to danger. Governments and communities should provide better health programs, counseling, and family planning education. Abortion should not be met with shame, but with understanding. A society must do better in protecting women's health, safety, and rights.
So, Geisler's view, the unborn is fully human. Geisler says that even before a baby is born, it is already a complete human being from the very start, from when it first begins to grow inside the mother. He believes also that abortion is never justified because the unborn baby is already a person and ending its life, which is what the abortion does, is the same thing as taking away an innocent human life, and that is never okay. And to support what he says, Geisler uses the Bible and he points to a verse. The verse is Psalms 139 verse 13 to 14, and it says, "For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb," which says that God made each person carefully inside their mother's womb, showing that every life is special and planned by God. So in short, Geisler thinks that every baby, even before birth, is already a real person, made by God and should be protected. Three main ways people think about unborn babies. The babies that still inside their mommy's tummies, whether the abortion is okay or not. Here's what each view means. So for the view 1, the unborn is fully human. Based on Geisler's view, he believes that it says a baby is already a real person from the moment it starts to grow. Because it's a full human, abortion or ending the baby's life is never okay. Next is the view 2. The second view is that the unborn is potentially human. This is one says that baby becomes more human as it grows inside the womb. Some people who believes this thinks abortion is sometimes okay. For example, if the mother's health or situation is in danger. For the third view, the unborn is subhuman. This view says that the baby isn't really a person yet. It's just a part of a mother's body until it's born. People with this view thinks abortion is okay if it helps with the mother's quality of life or personal choice. So basically, some people think that the unborn is fully human, other things that it's becoming human, and some things that it's not yet human. Biblical evidence for the sanctity of life. That means it's showing what the Bible says about why every human life is special and should be protected. Here's the main point. Imago Dei. From Genesis 1 verse 21, this verse says that God made people in His own image. That means every person is valuable because they reflect God, no matter how small, young, or dependent they are. So even unborn babies are precious because they are made by God. Next is commandment to not murder. From Exodus 20 verse 13, the Bible says, "You shall not murder." Geisler believes this also means we shouldn't harm unborn babies because they're innocent human beings too. Third is divine knowledge. From Jeremiah 1 verse 5, God says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. This means that God already knows and loves each person even before they're born. So life is important from the very beginning. So in short, the Bible teaches that life is sacred because God made it, values it, and knows each person even before birth.
So let's talk about the critics of alternative views. So Geisler argues that many views which supports abortion are inconsistent because they rely on arbitrary criteria to determine when personhood begins, such as viability, consciousness, or dependency. So first, let's talk about the weakness in view 2, which is often called potentially human view. This perspective suggests that the unborn is not fully human yet, but only has the potential to become one. Geisler challenges this by asking, when do we draw the line? If life is a continuous process starting from conception, then setting the boundary at quickening or viability becomes arbitrary. He argues that it's not logical or biblical to say a fetus suddenly becomes human at a certain stage of development, because biological life and human identity are continuous from concept onwards. Geisler also points out that this view confuses potential for life with potential for development, meaning the unborn doesn't just have the potential to be alive. It's already alive and simply developing. The next one would be flaw in view 3, which is known as the subhuman view. This view implies that human worth depending on physical or mental capacity, for example, on having consciousness or self-awareness. But Geisler warns that this logic is dangerous. If we base human value on mental ability, then even newborn infants, the elderly, or severely disabled could be considered less humans. This leads to what he called the slippery slope, when society could justify denying rights or even life to those who don't meet certain standards of ability. For Geisler, the only consistent and moral standard for human value is God's creation and knowledge of each person, even in the womb. In short, Geisler's framework insisted that life and personhood begins at conception, and that any other point of measurement is arbitrary and inconsistent. So let's go through navigating the moral complexity of abortion. So let's go to the moral sides where things becomes even more complicated. So abortion debate is not about just science or philosophy. It's also about deep moral and ethical conflicts. And this issue has four major perspectives, where the first one is sanctity of life, the next one is women's autonomy, the third one is fetal rights, and the last one, the fourth one, is theological view. So let's talk about sanctity of life. So this view holds that human life has intrinsic sacred value from very moment of conception. It sees life as a divine gift that should be protected under all circumstances. From this standpoint, ending a life is at any stage, including unborn, which is morally wrong itself, because they carry worth. The next one is women's autonomy. On the other hand, this view emphasizes an individual's rights to make decisions about their own body. It highlights the importance of self-determination, that women should have control over their reproductive choices, especially in situations involving health risks, poverty, or trauma. This principle upholds personal freedom and bodily integrity as essential human rights. The third one, fetal rights. Here, it focuses on the unborn child's moral status. Does the fetus have rights, particularly the right to life that might override the mother's autonomy? This question raises ethical and legal challenges about balancing two lives, the mothers and the unborns, and determining how to respect both. The last one is the theological view. So, in this part, religion and faith traditions shapes how many people view abortion. For believers, scriptures and divine teaching guides moral responsibility in matter of life and reproduction. This perspective sees conception as the beginning of life, planned and known by God. Making abortion is not just a moral issue, but as a spiritual issue as well.
Now we move on to the philosophical and practical debates about abortion. While the core conflict remains, both philosophical reasoning and real-life exceptional cases further complicate that type of discussion. So we can first start with key philosophical positions. The first one is pro-life argument. Now, pro-life argument argues that human life begins at conception, and therefore every fetus has the right to life. Even though they are fetuses, they are alive, so they have the right to life. This is often that appeal that biological facts and values the potentiality that yes, fetus have life because they are made from two cells, and cells are alive, which means that abortion is kind of bad because of how it affects the ethics of life, because you are killing life, right? But about the pro-choice argument is about that woman has the right to choose what happened to their bodies. Now we have these ethical considerations we have. There are four principles for ethics: the autonomy, justice, beneficence, and non-maleficence. The first one we have, autonomy, is being affected with the abortion, because in order to have an abortion, you must choose to want an abortion. So this is your own autonomy. That's why there are people who are pro-choice argument, and they're often citing bodily autonomy and the burden of an unwanted pregnancy, because it's your own life and you have the control for your own pregnancy. No other people are in control with your own pregnancy. That's why there are pro-choice argument. So let's bring it back again. Pro-life argument argues that life is important and life begins at fetal stage. While in pro-choice argument, they agree to having abortion because it's your choice to have an abortion. It's your bodily autonomy, and it's a burden of unwanted pregnancy. Now, there are some complex situations we can say. Now, I can discuss this. There are two. First is rape or incest. Now, I'll read the PowerPoint right now. These tragic circumstances raise the question of whether the origin of pregnancy mitigates the moral status of the fetus. According to Geisler, it still argues against abortion in these cases. focusing on the innocent life while advocating for maximal support for the mother. In short, in this complex situation, like in the rape or incest, Geisler just wants to argue that there shouldn't be an argument, because being happening to be in that type of situation, you must accommodate between the innocent life, which means that you are arguing with pro-life argument while advocating for the maximal support for the mother, which is the pro-choice argument. According to Geisler, that both of this situation, you must argue or not argue at all about being against with abortion. Because during a rape, the person who raped never minded that actual situation. They have their own, what do you call this, intention. The next one is life-threatening pregnancy. Let's read it again. In rare cases where continuation of pregnancy poses a severe risk to the mother's life, according to Geisler and many Christian ethicists, they support indirect abortion, which saves the life of the mother, but it results in the death of the fetus. Now, this is under the principle of double effect. Double effect is that principle where one effect is will lead to another effect, but something lags behind. This scenario, the mother's life will be preserved, but the life of the fetus will be degraded. So we have a double effect. But we must choose one. This is a life-threatening pregnancy. If we're going to choose the life of the fetus, the mother's life would be degraded. Which life is which life is more important? The mother or the fetus? In this case, we don't have to think about it, because the pro-life argument will move on to the life of the fetus, while the pro-choice argument will move on to the choice for the mother's life in order for her to be preserved. The next slide we have here will focus on alternatives to abortion, which could possibly answer some of the questions or some of those complex situations that was presented before. For those who are adhering in the sanctity of life perspective, promoting and supporting alternatives to abortion is a critical ethical imperative. Let us start with the number one alternative to abortion. Adoption. Adoption is choosing to carry the baby to term and placing the child in the care of adoptive parents, providing a loving alternative, offering the life for the child and a closure for the birth mother. In short, if you are the birth mother, instead of having an abortion, the kid will, you will put the kid to term. That's what I said earlier. And you need to make this kid and let her or him grow up and put this child into care of adoptive parents. Parents who are willing to accept the child. And rather than abortion, rather than killing the fetus, rather killing the child, you're allowing the kid to live a happier life with a closure for the birth mother. Next one is parenting support. Providing resources, education, and financial assistance to encourage and enable parents, especially those in challenging circumstances, to raise the child. You are allowing other people, such the same with the adoption part, but you are providing the resources, education, financial assistance to encourage, enable the parents that are those in this specific circumstances, the ones that I have said before, in order for them to know and understand that, like, they had children because of some bad circumstance. Now, they need to raise the child rather than dropping the child off. So they have a choice. They have this type of alternative where they can grow it out, let them have this parenting support, and let them be enabled to become parents and be encouraged in order for them to continue like to continue providing the resources, education, love for their children. The last one is support services. In support services, we have this crisis pregnancy centers, maternal resources like diapers, formula, which are material resources also, housing, counseling services, and essential components of pro-life stance that values both mother and child. So, like the previous ones, instead of dropping the kid or the fetus, you're encouraging the parent, the mother, to allow the kid to grow up rather than ending it early. So you're giving support, parenting, or allowing the kid to be adopted. And that are the three alternatives or the main alternatives to abortion. There are many other ways for alternatives to abortion, but these three are very, very important because they preserve both the life of the parent and the life of the kid. There are certain circumstances like those who preserve the life of the parent, preserve the life of the kid, especially in times of life-threatening pregnancy. Now let's move on to the next slide, which is the conclusion of our PowerPoint.
So for our final takeaway, it would state that Geisler grounds the moral status of an unborn being in the doctrine called Imago Dei. So Imago Dei discusses that every human being is created by the image of the Lord. So based on this theological situation, or foundation rather, Geisler argues that each human life carries intrinsic values and dignity from the start of conception, which would also explain that the unborn children are not stated to be potential persons, but rather they are actual persons whose right to life or to live should be valued and protected. Also, Geisler's view calls not only for the opposition to abortion, but also for proactive care. Protecting one's life is more than protecting the unborn. Supporting mothers and families emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. This holistic kind of approach reflects onto the biblical vision of justice and compassion, upholding the sanctity of life while addressing the real struggles that often lead people to consider abortion. So in regards to our stand, those who defend abortion rights emphasizes the importance of personal autonomy, freedom, and the ability to shape one's future. For them, the ability to access the abortion is not merely about ending a pregnancy, but rather it is also about preserving the right to decide when, how, and under what circumstances to build a family. This kind of perspective highlights the issues of women's equality, health, and the need to respect individuals' moral agency in making difficult decisions. So as we end this discussion, let us be reminded that abortion is a complex and polarizing issue. Each religion, not just limited to the Christians, are encouraged to move beyond simple arguments. The challenge here is to foster critical theological reflection that takes seriously the biblical witnesses, the reality of human experience, and the diverse perspectives involved. The final goal here is not to defend convictions, but to cultivate empathy and practical support to all those who are touched by this issue. May not be women, but also the mothers, the fathers, even to children and our community. Concludes our presentation for today. So I hope you learned something, and I hope you also learned from the previous presenters presented here above. So I hope that you have grasp on what abortion really is, and Geisler's view of abortion is. And I hope that you enjoyed our presentation, and goodbye.